Good morning. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us for this webinar. Before we get started, I just want to cover a few housekeeping items. This webinar is produced by the Underserved Victim Populations Training Project, a project of the Center for Innovation and Resources. Funding for this project comes from the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services Victim Services Branch, with funding made possible through the United States Department of Justice Victims of Crime Act. For those of you who can hear me, this might seem obvious, but I just want to remind everyone to turn on their speakers in order to hear the presentation. Use the Q&A feature to ask the presenter any questions that you may have. We will begin questions that have been emailed in prior to the live session. The chat panel is where you can ask support questions, which will be answered immediately. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter. Guillermo Auyon is a retired special agent in charge of the California Department of Justice. He spent 13 years with the California DOJ, retiring December 2019, and has an extensive background working with various domestic and international law enforcement agencies, central authorities, district attorney offices, social services, and nonprofit organizations. For the past 4 years, he has taken a profound personal and professional interest in the recognition and response practices with our special needs community. So I'll go ahead and we have Guillermo on, and we'll start with the first set of questions that we have.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
So Guillermo, what are ways that a supervisor can train social workers to interact or interview children who are autistic?
Okay, Emma, I think first of all, provide all the training and exposure that you can to your workers. I understand with the limited staffing and funding, it is hard to train all your staff. Webinars like these, in-house trainings, or bringing an expert or a trainer to facilitate a training at your facility, it's a great way of doing these. Create a checkoff list for things to look out for and things to do to facilitate or helping out your workers when interacting with children with autism. Develop and incorporate scenario-based trainings for your staff to bring their awareness and comfort levels up. Identify staff within your agency or organization that has more experience interacting with the special needs community. To develop a peer resource group. And lastly, if staffing levels permit, and your caseload warrants it, create a ASD special response team. A good example of that would be, for example, the larger counties like LA County. Our agency helped them create a Hague response team. And what a Hague response team does is, for example, assist on the international returns of abducted kids under the Hague Treaty. So since LA County had a huge volume of these type of cases, and it was we kept training and advising over and over different workers, because they have a huge staff of workers there, for example. We recommended creating a specific Hague team that dealt just with this. So that's kind of an example we could do, create a ASD special response team that just deals with the autism spectrum disorder community, and get them properly trained and get them all the tools they need for their toolbox, right? Another thing would be also, create partnerships with your local or national autism organizations to establish a resource for your workers. And if space permits, create a sensory room, or at least know where one is available. Just so we're all on the same page, a sensory room is vital for these type of situations. It's basically a quiet room. It helps them self-regulate through their personal senses, like special lighting, music, or objects. Some of the items you'll find in these sensory rooms are going to be like regular or weighted blankets, soft toys, bean bags, a trampoline. So that's some of the recommendations I would have in regards to getting people trained up, developing a team, and get them as prepared as possible, right?
Great, thank you. The next one's kind of a two-part question. So how often do you find that victims in child sexual abuse cases have developmental disabilities? And then I'll read the second part. Let me know if you want me to reread anything. And once a victim has been interviewed by a responding officer, how do you overcome the discrepancies that are bound to be present due to the officer's lack of knowledge of how to properly interview the victim?
Yeah. Hopefully I can remember both parts. In regards to the stats, last time I checked, I think nationally, people with intellectual disabilities are 7 times more likely to be sexually assaulted per National Public Radio, the NPR data run that they did by the Justice Department on some unpublished federal crime data. And the second part in regards to responding when an officer has already responded and potentially discrepancies, and what do you do to overcome those type of situations? No doubt that these cases are hard to investigate and to prosecute. Depending on the individual's assessed level of disability and discrepancy, attempt to re-interview and start over with the properly trained personnel and setting, right? Again, sensory room. And the sensory room doesn't have to be necessarily in one location. You could use the sensory room at the police department if that's where you're going and you have one. It could be at the hospital if the individuals are taken to the hospital and they have one. A lot of hospitals major hospitals have a sensory room that you could use to attempt to get a proper statement, right? Get feedback from parents or caretakers on disability and sensory issues to kind of give you the big picture, prepare prior to going into the interview. A cognitive interview process is recommended where the victim reports everything, no matter how small or trivial it seems. And keep in mind, like we had discussed during the webinar, keep in mind establishing rapport and literal questions, right? Start with yes or no questions to assess the ability of the individual. Use visual support if helpful. You could also consider having a person of trust present for the interview, and also consider video audio taping the interview, because this might be the only opportunity you get at getting a statement. And most importantly, be patient. Be very patient. And also, consult with your prosecuting authority and document and report everything that happened. Part of discovery is you got to provide everything, right? So whatever issues you had at the beginning, make sure you report that, you document that. And obviously, talk to your supervisors, to your peers, to the experts, and get additional suggestions in regards to, how to properly handle and interview these type of situations.
Thank you. The next question are, what triggers a child with autism?
So normally it's a reaction to any of their sensory issues, like anxiety, unwanted touchings or searchings that we had mentioned during the webinar. Normally that's what triggers something for a child, something different, something out of the ordinary, something they don't like, something that triggers their senses. So, you got to think about all 5, 6 different senses that we all have, and try to get as much background as you can, assess the situation, know the common triggers that we discussed during the webinar, and start off from there, right? And then start working your way one way or the other to be able to, do what you need to do with this individual.
Thank you. What are some nonverbal cues to look for when dealing with a person with autism that may manifest into a physical outburst? And then what's the best way to ease them?
So stimming behaviors such as rocking, spinning, covering the ears, self-harm, attempting to run away, or the wandering, and sometimes some of the indicators, right? The nonverbal cues that we talk about. In regards to what's the best way to ease them, I suggest talk calmly and softly, in direct short phrases. Once again, getting back to those little statements, little questions. Reassure that no harm is intended, right? Let them know that, hey, I'm not here to harm you. I'm here to help you, right? Avoid any quick motions or gestures. And simple as pointing, right? Pointing or waving, something that kind of helps put them at ease. And also model calm behavior, right? If you're at calm, they're going to mirror that. you know, they're going to model that. And also provide a safe distance, not only for yourself, but for them also, right? You know, create that distance, make them feel okay, you know, assured. And sometimes, you know, do not stop repetitive behavior unless it's a danger to themselves or others. You know, a lot of times this is what's known as self-regulating. You know, they're trying to calm themselves down. Do not express anger. You know, try not to be impatient or irritated. And also ask a family member or caretaker to assist. You know, and avoid any unnecessary touching that may create a fight or flight reaction, right? And I think that's even common with, you know, us. You know, if you don't, you don't like any weird touches or those type of scenarios. Ourselves, we tend to protect ourselves normally, right? That's just normal. And they would have the same type of reaction to that too. So kind of keep those things in mind.
Great, thank you. And since we have such a short time, we did have a couple questions that were messaged in just now. So I'm going to ask one of those. Kind of went along with an earlier question. Do you have any techniques that you would use to interview children with nonverbal communication?
So what I've done or used in the past is either, you know, a electronic assisted device or the PEG system that was mentioned in the webinar, you know, the picture exchange system. They're nonverbal. Some nonverbal kids that have dealt with personally and professionally, no sign language, right? So, you know, I've used. I'm trying to get proficient at it, but at least know the basic Common American Sign Language. That helps. A lot of these individuals too are great at writing too. I mean, they writing ability, right? Pen and paper, right? The old traditional way, pen and paper. Once again, be patient. These conversations are going to take a long time because they're nonverbal, right? And also, you know, use your common gestures. You know, no, yes. You know, I don't understand. You know, the shoulder shrugs. And a lot of, you know, being in the technological world now, a lot of these folks have, you know, an electronic device, being an iPad, a cellular phone. You know, I've used like the text messaging or the note, for example, the note portion of a phone, and have a conversation with these individuals, right? And you know, and it really helps because they get the opportunity to express themselves, right, and let you know what's going on, and give you a better understanding of what's happening, right? So all those tools, I would definitely, you know, make use of any of those, and at least carry a couple of those. You know, pen and paper and a pad of paper is easy to carry, right? Everybody has a cell phone, so you know, those are just great tools to have.
Great, thank you. And the next emailed question was, how can you properly identify indicators in order to make the proper referrals for services and provide the appropriate support the individual needs?
Well, don't forget that every individual with autism is different. You know, some core indicators are social communication challenges and restricted and repetitive behaviors. Refer to medical providers like a developmental pediatrician or a pediatric neurologist or child or adolescent psychiatrist for an appropriate diagnosis and treatments, right? And refer to governmental agencies such as the regional centers for additional individual or family support, and some non-governmental organizations also provide, you know, additional resources. You know, I'm going to throw some out there. I do not work for them. I don't get paid by them on it, and they're just tools that I've used that have been very good for me in the past and currently. So, for example, like Autism Speaks, Autism Society, and Autism News Spectrum. All those three sites, they're all, you know, websites, tons of information, very good information, from trainings to, you know, downloadable forms to, you know, a lot of different things, a lot of resources, a lot of tools for your toolbox, basically, that can really help you be successful or lead you at least in the right direction, you know, when dealing with individuals with autism.
Great, thank you. We have a couple more questions. One I'm going to ask because it kind of goes along with that. They're asking if you have an example of a short statement when trying to assess for risk.
So I'm assuming we're talking about the individual
Yeah.
when approaching an individual. Okay. No, so normally, I mean, it would be very similar to when we approach anybody in a friendly setting per se. Very soft, low key. Your typical hi, how you doing? Are you okay? My name is Guillermo. What's your name? Can I help you? What do you need? Um, Stuff like that. Real basic, very little, 2, 3 word sentences. That's normally the approach that we take and we recommend. Especially with the younger population, right? Try to keep it as plain and simple.
Great, thank you. And then we had another one. She was asking, is it common for autistic children and teens to have sleep issues? If so, do you have a suggestion on what can mediate the sleep problems that possibly aren't medication related?
Yeah. So percentage-wise, over 50% of children with autism have one or more chronic sleep problems. Excuse me. First I would recommend that you check with your medical and psychiatric providers to make sure that there's no secondary reason or medication that is causing the insomnia or the sleep problems. And just like you would do with any of your other kids, right? Establishing or creating good sleep practice. Make sure they got the appropriate sleep environment. Typically they like the room to be dark, quiet, and cool or cold. Because remember, they're sensitive to noises or other sensory issues like bright lights, shiny objects. And then make sure it's a comfortable environment, as comfortable as possible, right? Create that bedtime routine. Make that a routine, like a scheduled type, right? So they can predict what's going to happen and what's going to take place. And they include relaxing activities, such as reading, listening to quiet music, and obviously avoid using electronic devices, right? I think studies have shown that really alters your state, and even for us, it would create an issue of trying to go to sleep, right? Because it creates that unnecessary stimulation, right before you're gonna go to sleep. And then have a schedule in regards to when they go to bed and then when they wake up, right? And normally, for example, for us, our kids go to bed by 9, right? 9 o'clock. Put them to bed, get them comfortable, read some books, maybe do a little bit of music for about 30 minutes, probably, give or take. And then they start to wind down, right? And then also teach your child to fall asleep by themselves, right? If they're accustomed to that, then they won't be looking for you to go to sleep. Or if they happen to wake up in the middle of the night, they're not looking for you to be able to go back to sleep because they're used to you being there, while they go to sleep. Exercise, we try to implement that as much as we can. From running, swimming, bicycling, just being outdoors. Being outdoors is good. Is really good for everybody. Avoid doing exercises late, because sometimes that causes them not being able to fall asleep. And caffeine, usually they're not drinking any type of caffeine drinks, but for example, chocolate, some provide chocolate as a dessert or a treat, or so on and so forth. Sodas, obviously try to avoid sodas. And then naps, naps are okay. Just make sure they're not towards the end of the day, because then that's always going to directly impact, their ability to go to sleep, under the regular routine times, right? So those are some suggestions. And getting a good night's sleep can only help everyone, from the caretaker to the person with autism, right? Because that's going to really impact the next day, right? If they have a hard, night the night before going to sleep, and restlessness and not able to get some good sleep, they're going to wake up tired, potentially, moody, not wanting to go with the program, and and that happens. So That's some of the recommendations that I would give.
Great, thank you. And the next question that was emailed in was, how do we support families? So I would say probably like, how do service providers or law enforcement support families?
Okay, great question. And, be understanding and accepting, and also be culturally sensitive, right? Because, there's different cultures out there. I come from a mix, in a city. So, I got a couple different things going on. So I got to be very culturally aware of that, and be patient, right? Have a resource list ready, like we spoke before, of different governmental agencies or non-governmental agencies that can assist and provide services or guidance to families or the individual on the spectrum, right? Some examples of that would be like the Department of Developmental Services, the regional centers, social services. Within social services, you got in-home support services, county office education, the school districts. And once again, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but reach out to Autism Speaks, jump on their website. What has helped me further understand and really kind of get a good grasp on this is attend some of the autism resource fairs. These are great fairs to attend. There's 30, 40, 50 booths out there. And you really get a good perspective on all the resources that are out there and all the help that can be provided. And then there's the natural opportunity to interact, with people on the spectrum, families, siblings, et cetera. And it's been a really, really wonderful experience for me, and my family, attending these resource fairs. So I would highly, highly recommend it.
Great, thank you. And do you have any recommendations for school counselors?
I do. Funny you ask, because we are very active in our school community here, not only our local community, but our school community. So for school counselors, people involved with the schools, teachers, et cetera, establish a working relationship with the special education team, such as the teacher, the school psychologist, the speech and language pathologist, the occupational therapist. Educate yourself on what ASD is, right? Reach out to the parents, maintain a good constant communication with them, help with preparing the classroom setup, educate your peers and promote social goals, collaborate on the implementation of an educational plan. Most of kids that are on the spectrum will have some type of IEP in their file. And this is basically a blueprint of their education while they're in school, right? So be part of that. And also help out with managing the behavioral challenges with the child while attending school.
Great, thank you. And the next one, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and do one that'll be kind of relevant to the times we're in right now. So someone wrote in and said they would love more ideas on how to help the ASD population during this time of quarantine, especially since routines have changed.
Yeah, Mark, this is an excellent question. And, especially due to our current crisis, right? And me living it both as a parent and also as a professional, try to maintain existing routines and schedules as best as you can. Create a visual schedule and share with the individual. Let them see, let them take ownership of that schedule. Let them see what they're being asked to do during the day, certain periods, so they can kind of self-prepare, self-regulate for the routine of the day. What has helped also is creating a social story to explain what is occurring and what the expectations are. Model the behavior so they practice how to safely put on and remove, like, for example, personal protective equipment, right? The infamous PPE that everybody's talking about right now, the face coverings, the goggles, the gloves, and also be able to gauge their tolerance level, right? Because we get back to the sensory issues. Some are not going to tolerate the goggles. Some are not going to tolerate the mask. And it gives you a good gauge on what they're going to be able to tolerate, what they're going to be able to tolerate or not. And also the time period, right? You know, they're good for 10 minutes, for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, right? 15 minutes. So that kind of gives you a good gauge, and be able to implement things to take breaks between those 10, 15 minutes that they're tolerating whatever PPE equipment they're using. Also have parents or caretakers participate so they get used to them assisting or instructing. You can also use the stuffed animal or mannequin to demonstrate that it's okay to wear these items, right? Those are great icebreakers, especially if you're using something that they like. You know, that's always a great tool. And for those that are first responders, for example, you know, they love the uniform. You know, I've made it a point to attend all the career days fairs that the schools have here in my school community, and they love, you know, the bulletproof vests, you know, the helmets, the goggles, the glasses, all that stuff. So it's a great tool to break the ice and to bring that comfort level up, right? You know, and also visually sensitize them by showing them images of other people using facial masks as a new norm, right? The more they get exposed to it, the more they see it as the new norm now, unfortunately. That's also going to help, right? Also use social stories for washing their hands. You know, that's one of the big things right now too. You know, washing your hands for those 20 seconds, right? What we've done is convert it into a game. You know, by either counting or reciting, you know, their ABCs to 20 seconds, or set up some type of cool timer, right, where you can set up for 20 seconds and then, you know, show them how to properly wash their hands, right? And also expose them to the hand sanitizer, right? Some might not like the feel of the hand sanitizer. You got to keep that in mind. Or they might not like the feel of the soap. That could be another thing. Normally, kids really like the bubbles, right? So kind of incorporate the bubbles maybe into a hand washing scenario. So, you know, that's some of the recommendations. You know, maintaining a similar schedule helps tremendously with the distance learning also, you know, that everybody is doing now, right? You know, with many breaks in a reward system, definitely. You know, use their teacher as a resource and ask for their input. As long as it's safe, do as many things outdoors as possible. You know, the walks are great, exercise, bike rides. We've done the treasure hunts outside. You know, it seems to be Easter every Sunday here because we're hiding stuff and they're looking out. You know, going out and trying to look for these items. Fortunately, you know, we have a basketball court in the backyard that they can use. Kicking the soccer ball. You know, they love to draw, do things like with chalk. You know, you can go outside, draw on the sidewalk, in your backyard. And then transition, you know, other outdoor activities into indoors. I had a friend of mine, a real close friend of mine, that what he started implementing, because he has a kid that's also on the spectrum, is he created an indoor movie experience. I just thought that was awesome. I never really thought about it, but basically he created the whole movie experience by you know, he being the guy selling you the ticket. He was at the door collecting your ticket, punching your ticket. He set up a concession stand, you know, picked up your popcorn and, you know, your drink, and then walked them over to a separate room where the theater was there. And I mean, it was just great. I mean, it was a great idea. And I think I'm going to try that with my own kids, just to try something different. You know, just be creative, you know, keep in mind their sensory issues. You know, some other suggestions like indoor camping, right? Stationary bikes. You know, my neighbor has a stationary bike that he uses and puts on, you know, his TV and watches some outdoor show, and you know, he's like riding his bike outdoors, right? Video games are always great. You know, obviously, you know, you don't want to get them hooked on that. Cooking, cleaning, and also another great idea that I got is simple house chores, right? You know, even though, you know, it's great that they're helping, but they're also learning and developing themselves into mature adults eventually, right? You know, teach them those essential skills, right? So those are some of the recommendations that I have in regards to things you can kind of adapt, you know, due to our situation now and to the changes.
Great, thank you for the suggestions. And I just want to remind everyone, we only have, well, it's 10:30 now, but I think if it's okay, we'll stay on for a few more minutes. We just have a couple more questions that people emailed in. And then if anyone has any outstanding questions, if you want to put them in the chat box. If not, I did provide Guillermo's email in the chat box, and he's more than happy for you to email him, and he would love to talk with you. So let's see. So one of the last questions we have are, what are best practices for working with disabled adults who have been diagnosed?
Well, it's very important to treat them with respect and as individuals. If diagnosed, assess their abilities, get them the support they need to live a productive and enriching life, by gaining suitable employment, housing, and access to support groups. If they haven't been diagnosed, refer them to their medical providers to get them an official diagnosis to be eligible for support services or treatments, right? And also protection under various laws like the American Disabilities Act, vocational rehabilitation services, Medicaid, home and community-based services, which is, healthcare and long-term services, basically. They'll be entitled to some Social Security benefits too. And also education protection, under the 504 of the Rehab Act of 1973. Those are great things, to be able to provide to these individuals. And a lot of these folks, they live normal lives. They live normal lives, very, very fulfilling and enriching lives. So, keep that in mind also. I think that's very important to understand.
Great, thank you. We had someone email a question in, let's see. Well, maybe you already have one. They put, are you going to create a pocket-sized cheat sheet for law enforcement officers to carry while on patrol? So do you already have one of those? Or maybe we can come up with one together.
Funny you ask. No, I'm actually working on something, something that is useful, kind of, small enough to carry and concise, to the point, and that's beneficial, right? So I'm definitely working on something. Once I have something, I'll definitely, share it with the community. I think it's important.
Okay, great. And I'll end it with one last question. If you have any other good reading materials for additional information on the topic.
Once again, a lot of the stuff that I use for my research and just reading is those three sites that I mentioned, the Autism Speaks, Autism Society, and Autism Spectrum News. My go-to one is Autism Speaks. I mean, I get a lot of wealth of information from there. And they're associated with NEC, and other organizations that deal with this and provide support. So it's a great website. Any of those three, I would definitely there's tons of stuff. I mean, you could be looking at it every day and there'll be new stuff there. There's free training. Take advantage of it. Free training, good resources. Please take a look. I think you'll be happy with what you can get out of it. So.
Great, thank you. And I put the link for Autism Speaks in the chat box if anyone wants to copy it before we get off. And I think it's about time to wrap up. So thank you again, Guillermo, for getting on and answering everyone's questions. I know it was super helpful. So thank you.
Thank you again for attending this webinar. Please be safe. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and our ASD community, please. Take care and be safe.
All right, everyone, have a great day. Bye.
Bye.